The council come to order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson?
Present.
Campbell?
Present.
Oliver?
Here.
Ford?
Here.
Button.
Here. First up this evening, we have the consent agenda. There are 2 items on the consent agenda. The first is the town council minutes for January 6th, which we'll be approving tonight. And second is the Blacksburg fire officers and Blacksburg rescue squad officers for 2026, which we will also be confirming tonight. I thought I would just go ahead and read the names of those. So for the fire officers, that would be Chief Drew Smith, Assistant Chief Mark Smith, Captain Susanna Ratcliffe, Captain Colin Culver, Captain Parker Walters, First Lieutenant Wayne Myers Jr., Second Lieutenant Wayne Myers III, Second Lieutenant Shane Smith, Second Lieutenant Matthew Massey. And for our rescue squad officers, we're considering the Deputy Chief of Field Operations, Christian Long, the Deputy Chief of EMS Operations, Scott Davis, the Deputy Chief of Tactical Rescue, Merjan Hamad, and the Deputy Chief of Support, Laura Latanzi. What is council's pleasure on the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Campbell?
Yay.
Oliver?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Sutphin?
Aye.
Anderson?
Aye.
Okay, now we move on to public hearings, which there are none tonight, which takes us to citizen comments. As usual, please come to the podium, state your name and address, direct your comments only to the town council, and limit your speaking time to 3 minutes. I'll just note that the remaining agenda items on tonight's agenda are not public hearings, so we'll be voting on those. There might be council discussion, but tonight, the citizens' comment section, that's your opportunity to speak on any and every topic involving the town of Blacksburg. Anyone?
Elaine Jenkins, 202 Mateer Circle, Blacksburg. I had hoped that after the January 20th Town Council meeting that full information on all persons considered or interested in the open Town Council seats would be shared with the public. Yet here we are on the night of your vote with no information. I can still only conclude that the reason for this lack of transparency is that you prefer to handpick your appointees, which does result in them being political appointees. I still believe you simply don't want anyone on your council who may think differently from you. We need to have elected public servants with diverse voices, backgrounds, and experience serving on town council. Your comfort or discomfort with them is irrelevant. I would love to know the process you went through to land on your chosen appointees during your closed-door meeting. But given you have chosen not to be transparent about that process beyond the limited discussion at your work session, I thought I'd share my thoughts. Pete Macedo received 5,555 votes from the citizens of Blacksburg in the 2025 mayoral election. That's only 18 fewer votes than you received, Mayor Suffin. Yet the Blacksburg Town Council has decided that he is not qualified to fill the seat. Pete received more votes than any one of you received for town council other than Susan Anderson. If Pete isn't the best choice to appoint to one of the seats, I seriously don't know who is. The voters spoke, but you are choosing to ignore those voters. Joel Goodhart received 4,852 votes from the citizens of Blacksburg in 2025, and you have decided that he is qualified to fill that seat. I guess those votes count. James D. Harder received 3,696 votes from the citizens of Blacksburg in 2025, and you have decided that he is not qualified to fill that seat. I do wonder if you even reached out to him to be considered. Nevertheless, once again, you choose to ignore these voters. And let's not forget that Rick Johnson received 2,397 votes from the citizens of Blacksburg in 2023, only 38 less than the fraudulently elected Liam Watson. Yet you have decided that Rick is not qualified to fill the seat that he actually should have been in all along. You could finally do the right thing and appoint Rick to one of the seats. Yet you are implicitly still supporting the fraudulent election of Liam Watson, the candidate the Blacksburg Town Council recruited to run against Rick in 2023. Andrew Kassoff received 0 votes from the citizens of Blacksburg because he has never run for town council. Yet you have decided that he is the most qualified over all of these candidates for whom the citizens of Blacksburg voted. Mr. Kassoff, however, received all of your votes. Cherry-picking the people you prefer to be part of your town council ignores thousands of votes by the Blacksburg residents and undermines the democratic process. Blacksburg residents have heard you loud and clear. Their votes do not matter to you.
Thank you. We are still in citizen comments. Would anyone else like to speak at this time?
Hello, my name is Steve Gillespie. I'm at 201 Fairfax Road. I just want to say that I disagree with the previous speaker. I think that the procedures that you followed for your appointments are legal. I think that they're sound, and I appreciate that you do not revisit the elections, however long ago they were, for different offices to appoint people to your town council. The election for these next two appointments is going to be in November. If anybody has a problem with the two appointees and the job that they've done, or the other members of the town council, they can address that next November if they choose to. I have confidence that the two people that you've selected are qualified. We don't know who the candidates were. All we know is that you followed the law and made your decision based on whatever considerations that you have going forward, whether they were the circumstances of the election or not. In my mind, it's often the case when you're selecting people for an appointment, you do not make all of the candidates public for the office or for the position to protect those candidates. So I just want to say that I have complete confidence that you follow the law and that this is a democratic procedure. It will be a democratic election in November. And thank you for the wisdom that you've used in this case. Do not revisit all of the problems that we've had in the past. It would just keep the election going. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak tonight?
Macedo. I live at 502 Lee Street. I've been told I wear too much plaid, so I took one off. Time. This is all about time. You had 45 days to make a choice, and I feel you did it in less than 0. Because the first meeting that you had pretty much had your decision made at that point. If you didn't, then the names that came to you in kind of random ways would have had more time to be considered. You didn't give us a formal process. There was no request like Christiansburg did. There was no interview process like Christiansburg did. I'm not saying we have to be like Christiansburg. But they had 45 days to make a decision, and they took the time to do it. I'm not sure when the people you chose were decided upon, because you haven't told us anything. You haven't told us who you were considering besides them. Nothing's been acknowledged. Nobody on town council came and asked me if I was interested, until Daryl did. The Friday that this was announced, that you had 2 appointees that you had sort of landed on. That's fine. But people have been saying what I would do all the time, but none of you asked me until Daryl did. I said I'd be happy to be considered, but nothing ever came of that. Again, that's fine. So this is also about time, saying that in November, if our community doesn't like the choices, then someone can run for an election. Susan, you hate campaigning for elections. It's not an easy thing to do. It's really difficult. And I don't relish Joel, who just ran a campaign, to be serving on town council and to have to run a campaign again. And then next year, if he wants to remain on town council, to run a campaign again. It's a lot of time. And to just say, you had 45 days to take the time to incorporate as many voices as possible. I really wish you just would have taken the time to do it. Because the time to run a campaign for 1 year's seat, it's not worth it for so many people. You had 45 days, and you decided in 9.
Thank you. We are still in citizen comments. Would anyone else like to speak tonight? Seeing none, I will go ahead and close citizen comments. We're now in unfinished business. We have 2 items of unfinished business. The first is Resolution 1E26, a resolution adopting the capital improvement program for fiscal year 2027 through fiscal year 2031. We previously held a public hearing on this item on January 13th, 2026, as well as numerous work sessions and other meetings to talk about the CIP. Is there a motion on Resolution 1E26?
I move approval of Resolution 1E26.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I did want to bring one thing up. When we had public comment, one of the citizens that commented brought up questions about projects for the drinking water system in our town, and that we have these main breaks. We see the alerts that tell us that there's these situations going on, and the citizen was hoping that we would focus a little more on that. So during the work session, I brought this up to staff, and we talked about it a little bit. The CIP, what we work with, is a very large document, and it's very high level for legislative decisions by us. But there is a lot more detail. And so that particular individual, if I recall correctly, lives over in the Highland Park area. And so the director of planning or engineering and GIS was gracious enough to provide me some information. And she had said that in 2024 that the town had replaced water mains, like 800 feet of it, in the Locust Avenue area. And that that's one of our older areas. All of our older areas, these pipes get really old, and it's one of these where we get to them and learn the problems the hard way. And in 2026, there's about 1,300 feet of water in the Highland Circle area, and in 2027, there's another 1,000 feet of water main, and then there's another 350 sections. So the high level stuff that we were briefed on in the public hearing, and the concern of the citizen, at the staff level, and there is a lot being focused in, and I just asked her to focus specifically on that part of town because I knew that citizen lives in that part of town. But all over town, there is a lot going on to address. So I know we spend time on parks and quality of life things, but local government is about core services, which is your trash, your roads plowed, and making sure that the water goes down the toilet and the water comes out the sink like it should be. And we are, our town staff is working tirelessly and very deliberately to try to address this, and I was pleased to hear about that. So I just wanted to share that additional information. I don't believe the citizen's in here tonight. I will email her as a follow-up, but I wanted everyone to know that we did listen to the public comment and that we did dive in and find more information.
Any other discussion on the CIP? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Oliver?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Sutphen?
Aye.
Anderson?
Aye.
Campbell?
Aye.
The motion passes. Next, we have the town council interim appointments, but before we proceed, I have a statement I would like to read. Before the town council votes on the interim appointments to fill the 2 vacant seats on this body, I want to take a few minutes to walk residents through the process we have followed and why we have done so. These vacancies arose from my resignation from my regular council seat upon assuming the office of mayor, as well as Liam Watson's resignation earlier this month. Under Virginia law, when seats on a governing body become vacant, the remaining members make interim appointments to ensure the continuity of government. When sufficient time remains in the term, as it does here, the law also requires that a special election be held so voters can fill the seats. State law is specific about how this must occur. The council must act within 45 days, or the responsibility for making interim appointments shifts to the Montgomery County Circuit Court. The law also requires that at least 7 days before any vote, the council hold a public meeting to announce the names of all individuals being proposed for the appointment. The council first discussed the process at our January 6th work session, our first meeting of the year. At that time, several individuals had already reached out to express interest in serving on an interim basis, and we reviewed all of those requests. In keeping with the state requirements, we held a public hearing on January 13th, where we announced the proposed appointees and invited public comment. That same evening, we adopted a resolution directing the town attorney to petition the circuit court for a writ of election so that a special election can be held during the November 2026 general election to allow voters to fill those 2 seats for the remainder of the original terms, which end on December 31st, 2027. Since the public hearing, town council members have continued to receive and review feedback from residents. We discussed that input at our January 20th work session, and it has informed our deliberations leading up to tonight. I also want to note that some residents have asked why this process may look different from past appointments. In previous years, interim town council appointments were made without announcements of proposed appointees. However, state law changed in 2024 to require that, and today we are following the updated procedures that include public notice, a hearing, and advance disclosure of proposed appointees. The individuals being considered tonight, if appointed, would serve only on an interim basis. Their service would continue until the special election in November and the certification of those results, at which point the seats would be filled by the persons chosen by the voters. Our goal throughout this process has been to comply fully with state law, ensure that the business of the town continues without interruption, and give the public clear information and an opportunity to weigh in on these appointments. With that, we will now proceed for this agenda item, and I would consider a motion on the town council interim appointments.
I move approval of Joel Goodhart and Andrew Kassoff for the interim appointments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any council discussion?
Yes, there is. There have been a few points touched on tonight and over the past few weeks regarding emails, calls I've received, different things like that, about the appointments. Now, I'd like to start out saying to Andy and Joel, you guys are wrapped up in this, and I'm sorry about that. The town's been very vocal about their lack of trust for town council. That's something that I heard all throughout the campaign. That's something that I heard years before the campaign, and that's something that that is part of the reason why I ran, because I wanted to provide some sort of transparency for the town, because we've never felt as though we were receiving transparent communications. Now you guys are going to have an uphill slog to gain that trust with the town. And then an election right around the corner. And then another election after that. That's very difficult to deal with. Now, as I look down the dais, I see many people who have probably experienced some sort of strife, some sort of setback due to process because they weren't considered based on what they look like, who they are, a thought that they had. Whether that be a job promotion, an inability to help students institutionally, unfair knowledge and advantages due to rules that are unknown. We've all experienced this. I feel as though that's what we've done to the town. It's not fair to them to not know who should be considered. Even when I'm not even sure how much I'm able to say about the private meetings and conversations we have during the work session. But I did do my best to bring up all of the people there, all of the people who had reached out to us. I really wanted to ensure that they were being considered. There were a total of 6 people, from what I can tell. I went back through my emails a bunch of times to try and figure out who had spoken up and who was suggested by the people. Now, because of that, I think it would be foolish to call today fair or successful as a team. When I brought up process and reasoning during that meeting, you helped me to understand it from one viewpoint, but then we received a lot from other residents on what their viewpoint was. I had asked about the Christiansburg appointment once I found out about it, which unfortunately was only this past weekend. And the only reason is because I was too wrapped up in my campaign during the time, so when somebody finally let me know, Pete actually, I did suggest that as a possibility, because as Pete said, this is about time. We still have time. We still can do this in a way that feels fair for the town and that rebuilds the trust between town council and the town. We'll have to pull extra meetings and extra sessions, but that's what we were voted in to do. After the hearing on the 13th and the finding out about the Christiansburg process, I agree that we need to figure something out. As a town, we can rebuild that trust, and I would like to help with that. No matter what the votes are this evening, I want everybody to know that I am very willing to help whoever is ready to campaign, Joel, you included. I supported you because we both understand Strong Towns models. We both want to try and use those in town, see how they can be adapted to help the town. I think we can make a great team. It's not you, it's not Andy, it's the process. Steve, thank you for speaking up about how you feel about how this all went. I do disagree with you, as you can see, but it is still very valid that you brought that up. And Pete, thank you for speaking and even bringing up time, because that was a point that I didn't have in my prepared notes. I'm not sure. Actually, Michael has described how it's been done before, and I didn't like that process before. I'm glad that the law has changed. In the past, in just U.S. history, we've seen that laws are manipulated for group advantages. Do you think that we did that today, or that we might be doing that today, depending on what our votes will be? Sit and think with that. Now, yes, we may be doing this correctly by law, by the line of the law. But when we think about morals, values, what's fair, this doesn't feel right. As someone who works on a team of attorneys and contract negotiators, all of the lawful suggestions made within our work is done so as a direct interpretation of the law, and we do it in the most conservative fashion possible. They're to provide guidance, but not how to perform the process or tasks going forward. We're here as community leaders. We need to provide that guidance and make decisions that are beneficial to the town. Right now, that decision seems to be looking at this process again. I will continue to work to build trust with the town. I will do everything that I can. It will be difficult. I know that it will be an uphill battle, but I stand here with y'all. Again, we shouldn't be voting here on this today. We should be working on a process, I believe, similar to Christiansburg, who used that process for a 2 to 3 month appointment. I believe taking the extra time and the extra meetings will help to mend what has happened in the past.
Okay, any other council discussion?
Just a few things. So I also just learned about the Christiansburg process late last week, because I too was wrapped up in my own Campaign, however, at this late date, I don't feel like that is a process we can do now, but I think we should definitely implement that in the future. The only other time that I've experienced another appointment was when we appointed Jerry to fill out Leslie's term. He was appointed, he ran that November, and then he ran again the next November. So it can be done, and Jerry is proof of that. And I think that the voters can have input this coming November, and that's how it can go forward. I don't know how to assimilate all the discussion and the hearsay and the. I feel like we did this as best we could, and I appreciate your input, and I appreciate the citizens' input, and I hope that we can, together as a council, as we have done for so many years, prove that we have. And I always assume everyone I meet has integrity until they prove me otherwise. And I feel everyone up here has integrity and is doing the job to the best of their ability, and all we want is the best for this town. So that's all I have to say.
Well, what I said in the work session, I'll reiterate today. I know there are some people in there that I'm sure have spread some version of that around. It's only a 10-month appointment, and I've thought about it really more as not a political appointment, not as someone up here from a political process. I've thought of it more from a hiring position. You know, we're basically finding someone to do a job for 10 months. And so I've always thought of it, you know, it was like more of an employment. And so to have the discussions in closed session seemed right to me, because most other personnel matters are handled, you know, behind closed doors. You don't, you know, for various reasons, human resource things such as hiring are done in a closed session. And so that was kind of how I framed it in my mind. As far as I was concerned, it was, to me, I was looking for people with the knowledge, skills, and abilities, people that are generous with their time, generous with their skills, compassionate, open-minded, and people that are showing up now and have been showing up recently, doing the hard work, advocating to make our town the best place. And so at the end of the day, having Joel and having Andy as the two proposed interim candidates, you know, I'm 100% behind it, because I know these two people will bring, you know, amazing qualities to doing this job for 10 months, and then whatever happens, happens. But, you know, I want to make sure that my vote is going for someone that I know is going to show up and do the job. And I feel like these two in particular, with all of my knowledge about them, are really great choices. And that's where I ended with how my support fell out.
Well, for me, I looked at the two appointments a little bit differently in my own mind. I knew that if Michael became mayor, we would have an open seat, and so it seemed very logical to me for the next highest vote getter in this most recent election to have that seat, to be appointed to that seat. I've worked with Joel on the housing board for a good while now, and he is ethical. He does his homework. He comes to meetings. He has just been a great addition to our housing board. And so I, in my own mind, feel very comfortable with Joel being appointed to fill Michael's seat. The other seat has a lot of baggage. We've had a hard time with the whole process of the felony convictions and having to wait until a court for whatever was going to happen. That caused a lot of stress and distrust in our town, not only for the person involved, but it reflected, I think, badly on our council, even though I think we up here knew nothing about what was going on other than what we heard in court. That has taken a toll on people's trust, and we talk about elections. how many people got this many votes, how many people got those votes. And so to me, having somebody that ran for council either this past time or the time before wasn't the way to go to fill that seat. Getting back to something Jerry said, I think that we need somebody for that seat who has a proven track record at serving the town, and Andy Kassoff has that. I have seen him up here at the dais, on the dais, talking about votes that were very controversial, and the things that he said to me gave care and empathy to both sides of the room, both the opposing folks and the approving folks. So I think he has a nature to be careful and considerate. He goes out and looks at the site, sometimes multiple times when there's a development proposal. He does his homework. And I think for that seat, we need somebody who's trustworthy, ethical, and empathetic. And I think he's the right person at the right time for this. That's all I got.
Any other comments?
So I have no idea who suggested both of these going in. Joel, of course, I agree. My other idea was James, and I can understand your reasoning on that, Susan. I don't, like Pete said, I have no idea when these names came about. And I think that's part of the problem. There is no clarity on when any of that came out. Although I am confident in both Andy and Joel, they were names that already were there, and I felt as though we should have learned more about their experience. You all have more experience with both of their resumes, let's say. I have a resume that puts me in working labor rights movements, that puts me in protests for towns and for the town and for students. I have a different, and I have done a lot of work on the state level as far as politics go. So I am a person who has not in any way, I wouldn't have had a resume that spoke to anything for town committees or anything like that. If I was the fifth person on the ballot, if I was in James's position, would I have been chosen? Or if Joel and I had switched votes, would I have been chosen? That's also where it comes into how fair something may be. The fact is, we didn't provide a process. We didn't tell people how they can submit their name. We didn't tell them anything like that. And I had people who asked me about how Joel and Andy's names came up. And I told them, I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and check my emails. I didn't have an email until the 9th, when we announced it to the town. I went back as far as my email had been set up.
But you were in the work session. You were there, you were present, you were part of the conversation. So whether or not it was in writing, we were having conversations.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know where the names came from. They were already a proposed name. They both were proposed names at the beginning of that discussion. I don't know who told you or emailed any of you to suggest them.
So in 2024, when the news came about Liam's troubles, that was the middle of 2024. And then, of course, we had the presidential election. There was a lot of despair for a lot of people about where things were going. Because I work on Planning Commission, I see Andy regularly. And, not knowing what was going to occur with Liam at that time, this was, a year and a half because it took so long. Excuse me, Andy represented that, that we needed, the town needed to reestablish, someone in that position that would, I don't want to say bring honor, but just to do the job, and he had served on the planning commission at that time, like 12 years, and that if and when the council was ever needed to fill that position, he would be interested. So that's where the initial conversation was.
Okay. That's good to know.
And I think that each of us, I can't speak for everybody, but I think each of us came into that meeting with people in our head and who we thought would be good. And there was a lot of overlap in that who would be good. So I don't think that there was any kind of, I don't know, 2 or 3 people getting together. What are we going to do? I think we had a lot of overlap in who we thought would be good, just by the nature of knowing these people.
I agree we have overlap on Joel, and that Andy has shown over the years that he can do the work. I agree with you on that completely.
I would like to add one thing, since everyone seems to continually draw this reference to Christiansburg and Christiansburg's process. The process they did was what they chose to do, and we did this process. I agree with what you say, Daryl, and Lauren has already agreed that, if and when there is a future situation like this, a future council might think long and hard about a more formalized process. But it is an apples and oranges, and I mean that in the sense that it was a very short-term appointment for Christiansburg. It's a very diverse council in Christiansburg, and I believe there would have been as many opinions about people as there were council members. I don't think things would have coalesced, as Susan said, or coalesced so quickly. To put it frankly, I don't think they had, because they hadn't had an election yet, because it was before the election. So they didn't even have that as a potential template. So I honestly think they opened it up to the community because they were like, who's interested? Let's throw a wide net and see who's interested for this short-term appointment. The town of Rich Creek in Giles County has had some drama where most of their town council and mayors retired mid-year. That was the point where it had to go to the circuit court just to get enough people set up on their dais so that they could conduct the very basic business of their town. And in that case, I think the court reached out and literally cast a wide net and says, is there folks here that want to serve and, until the election in November? So I think that sometimes when you don't have any ideas or don't have some things to go by, like a recent election, for instance, where you've heard interested community members speak about, their values and where they want to be with stuff, then you do need to do that. But I think in my case, I felt like we were in a different place that wasn't as necessary. And by the way, to echo Daryl and Lauren, I missed that too. About when Casey resigned, I knew he had moved. I knew he wasn't running for re-election. In my mind, he was going to serve until he was done at the end of the year. And when he resigned, I think I kind of maybe was on travel. I don't know. I think I acknowledged it in my head and said, "Oh, that's interesting," but I never followed it to the next step that they were going to have to fill it for those couple months. And so I missed it as well of their process. So when that email came out, I was surprised to be like, "Oh, this is how they did it."
Any other comments? We still have a motion on the table. The motion is to appoint Mr. Kassoff and Goodhart to the interim positions. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ford,
Aye.
Sutphen,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Campbell,
Abstain.
Oliver.
Aye.
The motion passes. New business. Do we have any new business tonight? What about council announcements? And I'll start us off with one. I would like to thank our public works crews who have been very busy all around town working on snow removal efforts. They've hit up the major streets, worked on neighborhood streets. I think they will start on trails soon if they have not already. So thank you to our public works crews.
I have a couple. The dialogue on race, you all probably know, was scheduled for last Saturday, and with the whole weather event that we've had, it was postponed until this upcoming Saturday. I think we're supposed to have a little snow this Saturday, but hopefully the event will go on. So anyway, dialogue on race will be over at the Christiansburg Middle School this Saturday, same time it was scheduled for before. It starts with coffee with the cops in the morning. So if you want to talk to officers from our police department, from Christiansburg Police Department, or from the sheriff's office, that's a great way to see some of the, or hear some of the things that they experience, and hear how they work on policing in our towns and in our county. Later, there are other sessions. There's a free lunch. The whole thing's over by about 2:15 to 2:30. So please do consider signing up for that. You can still register for it, and it's free. I also want to mention that we up here, most of us are going to the Virginia Municipal League's Local Government Day. It happens annually, and it's this year it's Thursday, not this coming Thursday, Thursday, February 5th, and we will spend the day in Richmond. We'll go up that morning, see some other VML elected officials, go to our delegate and our senators, talk about things that are important to our town, and then come back that late afternoon, early evening. So we'll try to represent you well in Richmond.
Any other council announcements? Seeing none, we are adjourned. However, I'll just mention a few things. Our next work session is February 3rd at 11 a.m. We have a regular council meeting on February 10th and our town council retreat on February 12th. And then immediately after this meeting, I believe we're having a swearing-in ceremony for our 2 new interim appointees. So thank you all. We are adjourned.